Hello, everybody, to the podcast She Unplugged with my guest of the week, Helen. And Helen is a business psychologist and an expert in change and well-being. That's what I wrote down when we got started preparing. But the way I got to know Helen is at the WIN conference, where she did a workshop on finding your purpose and where she led a process for the women present there during the workshop who took us from, I haven't got the foggiest, I have some interest, but I don't know what my purpose is, by asking very precise questions and giving us kind of like the path to walk on to finding our purpose. And I remember I walked out with a mission statement at the time that I then put on my homepage. It's a few years ago, so the mission statement has changed again, but that's how I met Helen. So welcome, Helen. I'm so excited for you to be in my podcast.
I'm so happy to be in your podcast.
What would you like to be known for?
That's a good question. Something I think we are all wondering about lifelong. But as it is right now, I'm a keynote speaker and, as you said, a business psychologist. And the reason why I'm actually a keynote speaker and giving workshops and working with leaders and organizations regarding sustainable well-being is I would like us to thrive in spite of change and in spite of rapid change, sometimes also in spite of non-sustainable change, because sometimes it really is not sustainable and we have to go through it anyway. So I think my purpose is to share how can we do this together. And my view is very much a holistic view. I work very much with organizations as them being organisms, because my deep philosophy is that our body, and that is also what my next book is about, and what my previous books have been also about, but the next one especially, is that our body, which we all have one, right? That it's actually an enormous genius role model for how we can work with organizations, how we can work with leadership, and in sustainable ways, because our body has actually been on the planet for thousands and thousands of years, and it's very, very adaptive, and we are still here. Look at you, look at me, the listeners and viewers can look at themselves. So there's something there to catch, and that is actually what my deep passion is these days, to share that with organizations and leaders, and also with children in children's books, because they are the next generation.
Well, for a start, I would like you to share some of the wisdom that will then be coming in the new book, but also that you have published in the other book. But let me just see if I understood you correctly. Are you saying that our body, if looked at in detail, is like a big organization of, 50 trillion cells, I think we do have, in terms of like, how does it function? How does it work together? Who's running which part? And what can we learn from that body and put it into practice in our businesses? Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. Perfectly right. I would say if I may divide it in two, what is very practical is that we, in the first case, look at our body as immensely intelligent. We actually have a body intelligence. For example, proven by the fact, I think, that most of us have actually experienced, namely that we get a bodily experience before we get a thought about that something is right or wrong, or turn right or wrong, or go straight ahead, or choose this person and not that person, study that theme and not that. So back off, run away, whatever it might be. Our body tells us before actually our thoughts and our mind gives us some information. So that is for one, and that we can train. And that is a whole book in itself, but that is about, I call it noise reduction, where we work with all the epigenetic factors like nutrition, our feelings, our thought, our movements, the way we move around, like could be exercise, could be walking, breathing. That is one thing. But the other thing is that, yes, you understood it perfectly right, that when we look at the body as an organization, it's actually a genius role model, how to lead, how to be an employee, how to work together, maybe to redefine what leadership is, maybe to redefine what is actually the connecting tissue in a body. What would that be in an organization? And in my point of view, those are the deeds. I operate with 12 deeds that actually is the connective tissue in our organization. So with the deeds, we can actually decency, transparency, we can actually navigate, but it requires something from us, because it requires that I put my ego aside, and it also requires that I put my power games aside, and it requires that I reflect upon, is there such a thing as corruption and power games in the body? No, there is not, because if there was, we would all be dead. It would simply not function. It would be dysfunctional, deeply dysfunctional. And what we can watch these years, for example, I'm so very proud of actually myself sharing a podcast in 3 weeks' time with the leader of a company in Denmark, an institution actually, which has been it's been Europe's best public working place, and now it's also Denmark's best public working place. And what's interesting there is that they operate with what they call a leadership-free organization.
Wow.
Isn't that wow? And what a lot of companies in Europe whom I'm working with have learned from the corona challenges, they all already do give the power to the people in the front line. So they give them the power. They organize their work themselves. They are giving them money. They actually also have created a way of documenting, which they also need to do, and they call it a competence compass. The front line, even they themselves recruit new employees. So this company is actually doing a lot of what a lot of institutions and companies learned from the corona challenges. And what is interesting is they are purpose driven. And what is also interesting is that as those who are the leaders, but who are the facilitating leaders, what they say is that one has, as an employee, to accept that we are actually building the railway as the train drives along, meaning that you probably could say that you have to have a flexible mind, and also you have to be a very good co-creator, and there are no power games in that organization. So it's very interesting to meet a leader, but leaders in the sense of facilitating cells, and it works tremendously well. I'm not saying that let's not have any hierarchies and all leaders in all our organizations should be facilitating. But what I'm saying is that it's very highly interesting that it works that well for them, and that the way they actually do it completely imitates the way the body would do it and does it.
One thing I want to touch on is You said in our body, those 50 trillion cells, there can't be any ego. There can't be any me first and I say where it goes, because then it wouldn't work in the body. Who do you think in us is sitting in the driver's seat?
If we take it in the easy way, then I think all the cells are in the driving seat together. Because when we look at the structure in the body, it's actually one big co-creation. What the driving seat is about in the body is communication, really. It's that every cell, in my terminology, has a holographic consciousness of the whole, meaning that every cell is really diligently of service and communicates all the time. The liver, when it needs something, or when it's got enough of something, all the cells do that, so that every little cell actually has a consciousness of the whole. And that's what makes it possible that this constellation called body, physical organism, actually can work and thrive and survive.
If we transfer that now across into companies, that would be an argument for full transparency in organizations. And how do we then would have that full transparency work? And or how would we train everybody to understand everything?
I think it would start with understanding what kind of being we are, and probably by redefining what we are here for, which sounds very philosophical, but actually it's deeply practical, because we are also already seeing it actually in the social responsibility, if you will, movement or tendency, and also Corona has shown us that it would probably be a very good idea to be planetary and also support ourselves locally, because Corona has shown us that all these various borders in times of challenges and war and whatever, maybe even peace, but that we need actually to be regenerative organisms. We actually need also to think in and include the local perspective. So I think we would need to redefine ourselves as what are we here for, and practically it is, what is my passion? What am I actually good at? What gives me the sense of a nerve? Not something that I have to and shoulds and ought tos, but something that actually is easy for me and that I'm naturally good at. We can't all be doctors and lawyers, and I'm sure we shouldn't, because if in the body there were only doctors and lawyers, we would also be dead. What actually turns on this natural nerve of passion and an easiness regarding what we do. And we all actually have that. If we stop comparing ourselves with each other, if we stop thinking what we should be instead of actually looking at what am I good at? What would I like to train? Because that's another thing when you ask, how could we do that? I think we need to upgrade self-discipline in a way, and not in the sense of workaholic, but in the sense of that no one ever became good at anything without training, without exercising, without focus. And these days, the tendency is more that we spread out, we multitask, we do so many things at the same time. We want to focus on so many things, and then nothing goes anywhere. So it's about focus, it's about intention, it's about really going on a walkabout on the inside and having somebody ask us what we are good at and what we would like to become better at. because that's actually what makes the body so enormously good at what it's doing. It's that the liver, no liver cell ever doubted, am I a spleen cell or a little intestine cell? I'm in doubt. I'm really in doubt. So it's about finding out, what am I? And then train it. And that gives so much joy. And that gives so much self-worth and such a feeling of self-value. And from science, we know that we all so much want to make a difference, which is where we can exactly make a difference. And then train the deeds. What does it mean to be a human being with a purpose, being of service to something which is beyond myself? Because it's never been about me and mine and I. It's been about, like the cells, that's only my opinion, but that's how I see it after these 30 years of experience in internationally in organizations. Those who really get away with it and who are there also in 10 years, they are the ones who have grasped that, yes, we are here to actually do something good for the society. And of course, one can do that and earn money at the same time. Maybe that's exactly why we can also in the long run earn money and have some employees and be in the market also in 5 and 10 years. So it's about really finding out this, what am I here for, the purpose, and then what it means to be of service for me, my human weather forecast. I think that in 10 years' time, there'll be an enormous focus on deeds in society, because we simply have forgotten the deeds. That's why we have so many troubles and criminality, etc. We when we look back and we look at Plato and we look at Socrates, I mean, they had it. They had grasped it, and so many others with them, in so many philosophies and in so many, if you will, theological directions. The deeds are important, and of course they are, because that is what makes us decent people and makes us understand that it's not really about us. We are here also to support, help, do what we can to co-create.
Now you use the word deeds. Would you share with us what those 12s are?
I would like to share a few. Decency is one of them. Decency in the sense of paying respect to other people, and fairly down-to-earth way of doing it is to train both our brain halves, because it's actually fairly difficult to be a decent human being if you either only train the analytical part or the very sensing part. So we have to train both to become whole-brained, because that's also the infrastructure we need to actually create wholeness in organizations, wholeness around us. Because if not, it'll be black or white, it'll be you or me. We have to have both. So that is the decency part. The transparency part is to speak the truth, not to hide anything. Forget the power games. Power games are exhausting in the short run, in the long run, and they are so destructive for organizations. They are the true killers, really. They are the ones where, if we look at the top 10 American, European businesses, 2017, many of them aren't here any longer. It is because I think we have misunderstood what we are here for as companies. I think if we imitated what the body does, far more of us would be here in the long run, because we would not be polluting that much. We would be integrating, we would be regenerative, we would be all that the body is. And it's really not rocket science. I think it's so down to earth, logical. And also I do understand why the growth paradigm has influenced us as it has, and it's brought us hopefully also many good things. But as we see it now, we simply need to shift our mindsets, and we need to contribute to actually shift the paradigm. And the wonderful news is that each of us are masters in doing it. We just have really to pull forth the masters in ourselves, which is also why I forgot to say that in the very beginning. But that is also why I offer the seminars I do and my well-being coach education, because we in our educational system, the deeds aren't taught to us really. We are taught math and languages, but are we taught, for example, body culture? Are we taught poetry? Are we taught art? And actually, those are important ways of sowing seeds in our minds for us to become whole human beings who can then also contribute in ways of wholeness.
I totally agree. And I find it important that we go on that path of that paradigm shift. And when you talk, for me, the latest book of Simon Sinek came to mind, where he basically distinguishes between the finite game and the infinite game. And the mindset a lot of companies have, maybe even the majority, is the finite game. They want to win, they want to be the best. And we read it in the mission statements and we read it on their homepages. We want to be the market leader, we want to be the best. And he kind of says, well, that's all very nice. And then? What then? Where does it go from there? And if you look at the infinite game, then it's about just thriving to come better and better, or the better version of myself the next day, the next year. And also for companies, improving their products to kind of like be better at what they do to serve. And that's what you again said, to serve a higher good, not just to make money. It's great to make money, but to serve the community or to serve a deeper purpose.
Yeah.
You mentioned epigenetic factors.
Yeah.
Could you just tell us how you define epigenetic factors?
Yeah, it's not really my definition, but the scientific definition is that for a long time we believed that we are born with some genes and that's it. That's my heritage. Epigenetics tells us via the scientific research that, interestingly enough, our DNA can actually be turned on and be turned off. We all have, so it seems, according to science and to research, that we all have many kinds of diseases which can actually be activated or not. And with some people, they are activated, with some people, not. What is it? What are the factors that activate or not? And the epigenetic factors are nutrition, feelings, thoughts, the people I am around, friends, my family, colleagues, how I am influenced by the surroundings. It's exercise or the lack of all that. And interestingly enough, in those various unique combinations, which is in every human being's life, some illnesses, some diseases, some psychological reactions can be activated or not, depending on what we eat or not. So it's actually, you could say it's about lifestyle. So it's about how do I choose to live? What consumer do I used to be? So it's a conscious choice. That's not what epigenetics say. That's what I say. But I think the bridge from talking about epigenetics to, and then what can I do, is have a look at, well, how am I living? What actually really exhausts me? What makes me unhappy? Is this a thought that actually builds me up? Because some of us maybe don't always think about that the thoughts we have we can actually influence by saying, hey, thought, where did you come from? And do I want you to completely fill my whole brain? No, no, I do not. Then what thought would I like to actually circulate? I would rather like this thought to circulate, and then repeat that. Because when we start repeating or actually just thinking in new ways, or taking all the epigenetic factors, walking in new ways, or running, or making some yoga moves or whatever, we start building new neural pathways. And neural pathways is the same as storing new psychological information in our psyche. And what we know from psychological research, which I think is tremendous, exciting, and those are not new news, but it is that the majority of feelings, thoughts, habits in general, they will determine my life. The majority of thoughts I'm thinking, they will deter what I'm thinking next. So there's hope for everyone, because we can actually start becoming more conscious about, what am I thinking? I don't want to think that. Well, then what do I want to think? I want to think this. And I don't want to lie on the couch all day. Well, then how do I get out? Well, then maybe just 5 meters of walking out and back. That's 10 meters. That's great. That's an enormous improvement compared to lying on a couch. So there's hope for everyone, but it does take some kind of conscious choice that I think it would be wise if I changed this. I think it would be wise and a good idea for me, if I stopped doing this and started doing that. And there comes then, all these New Year's where we want 5 things and we make up these enormous goals. And I want to run a marathon in March, and now it's January. And I mean, how not fair that is to many of us. What about, hey, I want to go for a walk every day and the rest is bonus. Then I'm building up new neural pathways about, hey, I'm actually keeping my promises to myself. And that's a different way of living. So it's a consciousness about, what is my intention? Intention is another very important thing when we talk about epigenetics. Intention and focus. Because as Aristotle said 250 years before Christ, he said, the human being is what it repeatedly does. And we are what we repeatedly do, for good or for less good. So we are in the driver's seat, really. But we are very much also depending on the peers we choose, the friends we choose. We really need to choose them well. And the Native Americans would say, go into nature. A Japanese professor, which I'm reading at the moment, he says, go into the forest and do some forest bathing. Because as the Native Americans said, they called the trees for the standing people. So I think that's also right and left brain coming together. I mean, who would have thought 10 years ago that we would hear about a Japanese professor with a great reputation and actually an advisor for the Japanese government, advising the government to tell the public to go forest bathing 3 or 4 hours a week.
That doesn't surprise me, because out of Japan came the research on the water molecules.
Yeah,
and the wording that we put in, or the music that, I mean, he did research on music that he played and words that he put on the glasses. I find the way you described it very clear, and what it takes, and I think that's really maybe the hardest part. I see it as a waking up, kind of like a sleepwalking, and this is what I see around me, many people do. It's kind of a sleepwalking. We do. Things happen to us. Life happens to me. And unfortunately, and I'm part of that group of people, things have to go really terribly wrong before that consciousness kicks in? Or how are you advising people who haven't woken up? Or how would you advise them to wake up? Or how do you help them to wake up?
Well, I completely understand what you mean with waking up. What I do is, and I think that is what we can do as human beings, which is such a heavenly gift that we have, that we can use empathy, and that we can go in resonance with each other, and that we can show compassion, not that we necessarily suffer with each other, but that we use our empathy and go in resonance with each other. And the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard would say to meet people where they are at, because we all have a story, and that story in many ways have determined our lives, and we all have coping strategies, which I also write about in my new book and teach these days. And those coping strategies, they've worked enormously well for a while. They've actually been, for most of us, a survival strategy. And at some point, it starts working against most of us. I do various things. I support people in finding out whether there is such a thing as a coping strategy in their lives. And then we have a loving look at that. And then we work around basic assumptions, because we all have subconscious basic assumptions, including myself. And it's such a relief to become conscious about something that determined my life without me knowing it. And also actually with me and us doing stuff. When we look back, we think about, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why did I go into that? Why did I keep on being in that relationship, in that working environment? And a lot of times those are basic assumptions actually determining our behavior there. So I support individuals and organizations in actually, I've actually developed a method described in my previous books, how to actually dig up what is subconscious, because you don't know what is there when it's not out of your conscious reach, really. And that done, we start then looking at, so who am I then really? It's a bit like the Matrix, actually. We've been so diligent, we've been so wanting the best for ourselves, for our workplace, for our family, and suddenly one day, mostly due to either illness or life, death, divorce, we kind of wake up in the sense of that we are shaken and we need to find a new ground. And the good news is we don't need to get out on that limb before actually changing, because when we think about what responsibility means, the ability to respond, if we just start in the small things, listen to what my body is actually signaling. Listen to what I am sensing and feeling when that happens, when that happens, when that happens. So that I in every situation, I start using my ability to respond and use that to build consciousness. After a while, I have myself connected the dots without going necessarily to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. It can actually be done in the small ways. The small ways are very often the best ways. In day life, being in the grocery store, meeting a neighbor. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Do I want still to gossip in small ways or in big ways? No, not really. Why do I actually do that? I don't know. I don't know where it started even. So that we start changing it in small ways. And then suddenly the small ways become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger ways. And suddenly I've actually got a redefined perspective and a redefined and conscious perspective of who I am and where I'm going, by actually using my ability to respond.
Well, what you describe, in my words, it would go in the direction of actually freeing myself of all the conditioning, of all the layers upon layers upon layers that have been put on me.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out who I am even switching on the sensory system of the body. How does my body feel? Do I feel an ache, or is everything running smoothly? Even that shift, back in the days, that was I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I define the words sort of like sleepwalking. You know, I'm there, but I'm not really there.
Yeah.
So
and a lot of people describe that's exactly that feeling to me. It's as if I'm walking beside myself. I'm not really me. The reason why I think I put it in the words I do is to do what I can to make it as practical as possible, so that we can actually start right now. For example, in the way, you know, every summer I give various summer seminars. I have what I call the Open Body University, which is offered every summer, and now also over the year. What I, for example, teach during my fasting seminars, which I've been giving for 30 years, is to support people in starting talking to their body, starting talking to their organs, asking the liver, what do you want to tell me? And it's incredible what the liver and the kidneys and the spleen, I mean, what they've got to tell also, because, I mean, it's complete overload. They're wanting to talk to us for 20, for 30, for 50 years. And finally they get a chance. And so they actually have got so much to tell, which is of enormous support for the human being doing that meditation, because such a lot of content can be prevented. Disease can be prevented. And also imagine the sense of being in, maybe not in control, but in contact with my body, that I'm not just reactively trying to get rid of a headache or eating pills for this and for that and for such. I'm going to the source actually and asking, hey, what is that symptom about? What can I do? Because the body is the biggest healer. And when I say the body, it's, I mean, psychosomatically, body and psyche is one. So many answers can be given. And in cultures, previous cultures, before we came along and thought that we were so wise and so clever and so smart, they actually, in those we call primitive cultures, they actually asked their bodies. That was a natural part of being alive. That was a natural part of going through rituals, going through maturing in life, going from child to teenager to grown up. I so understand why people come to psychologists and whoever can help them and say, I feel like sleepwalking. Because if we think about how amazing creatures we are and how little of that genius we use, maybe it's 0 point many zeros 1.
How can we be of service to our environment? We talked about that. I wonder if we need somehow, or if we have lost in our evolution that thought, that feeling, that knowledge that we are part of the system, the body, and that the body is of service to us and we are of service to the body. One of both kind of like leave the table when things go wrong. That by getting back in touch, and I've seen that in cultures like in Australia when we went traveling, the Aborigines, they're so deeply connected to the earth, to nature, to themselves. They don't see themselves as them, they see themselves as part of nature. They see themselves as serving nature and nature serving them. How do you see our future in the next, I don't know, 10, 20, 25, 30 years? What do you see is coming our way?
What I see coming our way is that we will have some great wake-up calls, which we have had all along. We just didn't really maybe interpret them that way. Because, as you also say, we have, as a planetary tribe, we've distanced us from nature due to the growth paradigm, and also at some point church or religion came between us and nature in many ways, because there was a time where we actually, you could say it started with actually when we started the industrialization. Some philosophers would state that we've actually distanced us too far away from nature, and we don't listen to nature out here, and we don't listen to nature in here. That's macrocosmos and microcosmos, same thing. And the wake-up call, what we can expect in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years to come is that we will be forced to listen. We'll be forced in a way that I think we'll see more like tsunamis or earthquakes and stuff like that. And we'll also see sadly, financial recession. And a bit like what Corona did to us, we will then, because it's about life and death, in many ways, also financial life and death, we will we'll be forced to actually work in the way the body does. We'll be forced to trusting our employees and actually practicing self-organization. Leadership will be forced to redefine itself, finding new paths, so that leaders and leadership will be about facilitating. A lot of things will move around power. So we'll see power waving back and forth and back and forth, until, sadly, a lot of energy and financial resources have been used in that process. But it seems to be necessary, because it is as if that when we go from one paradigm to another, if we don't listen, we will have to learn it in a bit in the hard way, sadly. So I think we'll be by nature, we'll be forced by financial conditions, we'll be forced to redefine what is a company, what is an organization, what are we here for, because we'll be forced to actually work pretty much local, because a lot of our global infrastructural pathways, they'll be blocked for one or the other reason. So we'll be finding ourselves in more local communities and more self-organizing, more co-creative, more creative, more innovative, and imitating nature in many ways, also in our product development, so that we pollute less. And we'll redefine what health is. We'll also redefine our health system, so that all these immensely dedicated physicians and doctors out there, that they will be allowed from what they learn at university to actually work more holistically. Because I work with so many doctors, physicians, nurses, and they so wish that paradigm would change as well. But they don't learn it, and they aren't allowed to learn it at university. It's not in their curriculum, even though they wish for it. So I think we'll see a redefinition going in a holistic direction in many, 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 many ways. And we'll see regenerative and regeneration grow, so, because that's one of the life forces. It's distribution, it's regeneration, it's co-creation. We'll see these life forces, which are so naturally alive in nature and in our body. We'll see them also start working their ways very effectively in organizations and in public services as well. We are a very adaptive race. It's so deep in our nature that we want to make a positive difference, and that we actually want to do good. And if you see the tendencies in the world, there really are powerful reactions towards dictatorships. Some are more successful than others. And then also the challenge is always then what takes over when the dictator is gone. We see that again and again and again, that we get rid of the old dysfunctional structures, but we don't have the democratic structures ready to take over. And then just another dictator-like force takes over. And probably that will happen sometimes over till from the grassroots level, democracy structures have made their way so that it's actually a grassroots movement. It's the people. So I think the future is people governed in many ways, much more than we see it now being business governed. To answer your question in a very short way is that what we've seen in Corona being a crisis, we'll see over and over and over again, influenced by other kinds of crises, that we, due to the crisis, life and death matters, we'll just have to do what nature would do, what our body would do naturally. And in that way, it'll become a habit and a habit and a habit and a habit. And suddenly it's a structure and we find out actually works. Why not go on doing that? So that'll slowly take over.
What qualities do you think will be required for us to learn those new ways? I mean, empathy, you mentioned already, and I think it will be part of that system. To redefine leadership, to go towards facilitating the work of the team or the company. What qualities, what values, what strengths are needed to do that?
I think whole-brainedness, for one thing, because it's really almost impossible to create infrastructures of wholeness in the outside world if you don't have infrastructure of wholeness in your brain. The other thing is that we actually have got another brain, namely in our digestion system, and that's not something I invented, but interestingly, we have cultures of bacteria down there, and 90% of our nervous system goes from there to our brain, and only 10% goes the other way. So we need to actually take care of what we eat and also recognize that we redefine ourselves as beings because we are more than we thought. So that's brain number 2, which we need to look into, because these 2 brains are very important for our ways of, because that's, in other words, that's biochemistry. And biochemistry rocks and rules. And so we need to actually really look into our biochemistry, because that biochemistry will also facilitate how I am able to understand the world. How am I able to change perspective? How am I able to pull my ego out of the equation called life and recognize and simply grasp that it was never about me. I'm certainly a valuable being. I can certainly contribute. I can certainly co-create, but it was never about me. It was about that I am a spleen cell or a liver cell or whatever cell I am, and find out what cell I am, and then really go together with the other liver cells and create an organism that can thrive and survive and be sustainable and robust and resilient. And we are champs in that. We are universal champs in that. So it really needs these qualities of redefining why I'm here. It starts there. And it can also start, I think, in looking at my local community and have a look, what can I contribute with here? For example, in Japan, an economist told me, who has advised the Japanese parliament, they've got a system which actually grew from that they had so many elderly people and they didn't have finances. Their national economy simply could not provide for all these elderly people and all these services they needed. So they created a complementary system where, for example, if you're good at moving the lawn, then I call you, hey, could you come move my lawn? And that you get a certain amount of points. And then somebody calls me and say, Helen, can you come and cut my trees? Yeah, I will gladly come and cut your trees. or whatever it is, and then I get some points for that. And those points we can swap them in between us, but I can also give you my points so that you can pay your health insurance. So I mean, it's so many things are possible locally if we start rethinking resources, inner resources, interpersonal resources, be more innovative there, because we're very strict. We are very much putting more and more control in our societies, which in some ways is incredibly important, and in other ways it could be interesting to balance them. But locally, start locally, always start locally. There's so much to do locally, because that's where we live. That's where our children grow up. That's where they go to kindergarten and school and gymnastics and sports and football and basketball. And that's where the neighbors are. And we could do amazing stuff locally. We don't have to ask the government about everything. We could do a lot of stuff.
I really like that. And it kind of reminds me of a community I know in the north of Scotland.
Yeah.
It's my kind of second home. I feel very much at home there. And there, the focus is the community. It's the local community. It's what can I do for the community? What can I do for you? It is putting the bigger picture first and saying, well, I also do a job that might not be my favorite one. So they have the people working in the garden, and then they have the maintenance people. And I remember somebody telling me, when you have the job to clean the toilet, which is definitely not the favorite job of anybody, but take a pride of leaving that toilet in a way that the next person walking in there is like joyful. That is kind of like the way you described that for me. This is what they try to live there. Helen, I could talk to you forever and ever.
Likewise.
Thank you. Helen, was there a question that you would have really wanted me to ask that I didn't? Then you could answer it now. Or is there something where you say, I would really want to repeat that, I would like to underline that, that's the most important thing for me right now?
I think you asked so many excellent questions, which I really love to dive into. But I think what I would like to say at the end is, when I think about all the people I've met during all these years, in organizations and also individually, what comes to my mind is that we strive. It's so life confirming that we have ambitions and that we want to do good and we want to contribute. And that said, I think it could be a relief for many if we started out with, I'm actually good enough as I am. I don't need to change. Of course, that's not the same as that it's okay that I terrorize other people, etc. But I just meet so many people who lifelong think they should be better or different, more. And so they are more surviving than actually living. And they're pretty hard on themselves. And when I think about those people being hard on themselves, when I stand beside them, when I meet them, I think they are marvelous. I think they are amazing. And they don't need to change a thing. Just actually by being who they are the biggest gifts to the world. Without saying anything, we can be inspiring. Without saying or doing anything, just being in the same room with each other, we can give so many, many things. And so many qualities to each other. I think that's also important that we do that as grown-ups and share that with our children, so that they, with all this social media stuff and likes, and if I haven't got enough likes, what am I then worth as a human being? So that we actually mirror each other that way. I mean, throw away the likes and then be with people who like you for whom you are, and spend time with them, because that is what gives us these enormous joys and good experiences and fulfillment. Because if not, we'll suffer. I heard somebody say, or read it somewhere, that in Sanskrit, the original Indian language, the word suffering means the lack of being satisfied. And so I think we just run around, many of us, lacking. We feel like we lack, that we are not good enough. And in a sense, we were born with plenty. And I think it's so important that we lovingly actually share that, reflect that, resonate that with each other, respectfully.
Respectfully.
And respectfully in the sense that respecting differences. There's not one truth, and there never was, and there never will be. We have to respect each other's different ways of viewing life, may it be politically, religiously, and in other ways.
And that's the most beautiful way we could finish our conversation. And I wrote it down, this sentence: you're good enough as you are. You don't need to change anything. And although I might disagree with certain views you have, I can respectfully live with that difference. Helen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it so much. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.